Oh my God, you people are so cruel. Why didn't anyone save him? Hurry up, someone help me. Nina shouted desperately, turning to the frozen crowd. Please, he's still inside the car. The black SUV burned hotter now, flames spreading along the crushed front, thick smoke pouring through the cracked windshield. Traffic had stopped completely. People stood at a distance, whispering, recording, watching but not moving. Someone said the name quietly. Moretti. Another voice replied, tense, almost afraid. That's mafia business. Stay out of it. Inside the vehicle, the man was still trapped. Nina stepped closer despite the heat pushing against her skin. Through the fractured glass, she saw him clearly, now a white man, around 40. Expensive suit, darkened by soot and blood. A thin cut ran along his cheekbone. Another above his eyebrow where the impact had struck him hard. Blood mixed with ash, streaking across his face. His head hung slightly forward. He was losing consciousness. Sir, can you hear me? Nina called urgently, pressing closer to the window. Stay awake. Don't close your eyes. No answer. Only the slow rise and fall of shallow breathing. Fear tightened her chest. Hey, look at me, she shouted louder, knocking on the cracked glass. You can't fall asleep, stay with me. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his eyelids moved slightly. The flames crackled louder beneath the hood, sending waves of heat into the air. Someone behind her yelled, Miss, step back. The gas tank could ignite, but Nina could see something the others could not, the way his chest struggled for breath, the way his hand trembled weakly against the door panel. He was still alive, but not for long. Nina turned quickly, searching the ground. A heavy piece of broken concrete lay near the curb. She grabbed it with both hands, feeling its rough weight press into her palms. Stay awake, she whispered urgently, stepping back toward the burning door. Please don't give up now. She struck the window. Inside, the man flinched weakly at the vibration. His lips moved slightly. Nina struck again, harder this time. A thin fracture spread across the glass. Smoke thickened inside the vehicle, filling the small space with suffocating darkness. Sir, talk to me, she shouted, panic creeping into her voice. You need to stay awake. His head shifted slightly toward her voice. Finally, a faint sound escaped him. Help. The word was barely audible, dry and broken, almost lost beneath the sound of the fire. But Nina heard it, and that was enough. I'm here, she said immediately, her voice stronger now. I'm not leaving you. She raised the concrete again and slammed it into the glass. The crack widened. Heat surged outward through the fracture. Sweat gathered along her forehead despite the cold air around her. Behind her, the crowd grew louder, voices filled with urgency but still distant. It's too dangerous. Wait for emergency. You'll get killed. Nina ignored every word. She struck the glass a third time. The window shattered. Fragments scattered across the pavement. A rush of thick smoke burst outward, burning her eyes and throat. She coughed but forced herself closer, reaching inside the broken opening. Stay with me, she said, grabbing his coat collar. Don't you dare fall asleep now. His head rolled weakly toward her shoulder as she pulled. He was heavy, dead weight already pressing downward. His face was pale beneath soot. The small cuts along his cheek and brow smeared dark. Come on, help me, she pleaded, bracing her foot against the twisted frame. I need you to try. For a second, he didn't move. Then his fingers twitched. His breathing caught painfully in his chest. He tried to shift. The movement was small, but real. Nina tightened her grip under his arm and pulled harder. His body slid forward a few inches. Good, that's good, she said quickly, urgency replacing fear. Stay with me. Flames flared suddenly beneath the engine, spreading along the underside of the vehicle. A loud pop echoed from somewhere inside the hood. People screamed and stepped farther back. Still, no one came forward. Nina pulled again with every bit of strength she had. This time his upper body cleared the frame. His weight nearly dragged her down with him. She staggered backward but refused to let go. Step by step, she dragged him away from the burning vehicle. Only when the heat eased slightly did she lower him carefully onto the asphalt. He coughed weakly, drawing in shallow breaths. Nina leaned over him, her hands trembling slightly as adrenaline faded into exhaustion. Stay awake, she said softly but firmly. You're safe now. Help is coming. His eyes opened halfway, but aware enough to see her. Don't let me, he whispered faintly. You're not dying today, she answered quietly. Sirens grew louder in the distance. Red and blue lights flashed across nearby buildings. People began moving closer now, voices filled with relief instead of fear. Paramedics rushed forward carrying equipment. Who pulled him out? One asked urgently. Several people pointed vaguely. But Nina had already stepped back. The moment belonged to survival now, not recognition. She picked up her bag from the pavement, brushing glass dust from her sleeve. Within seconds, she was walking again, blending into the ordinary movement of the city. The ambulance doors slammed shut with a heavy metallic thud that echoed through the cool night air. Inside, paramedics worked quickly, their voices calm but urgent as they assessed Adrian Moretti's condition. Oxygen mask secured, pulse monitored, blood pressure dropping but stable. One paramedic pressed gauze gently against the cut above his eyebrow, while another adjusted the IV line with practiced precision. Adrian drifted in and out of awareness, the world around him flickering like an unstable signal. Sounds reached him as fragments. Sirens, instructions, the soft rhythm of controlled urgency. Pain pulsed along the side of his head, dull but persistent, reminding him he was still alive. Flashes of memory came in broken images. The screech of metal, the violent impact, smoke filling the interior of the vehicle, the smell of burning fuel. The terrifying realization that power meant nothing when oxygen disappeared and doors refused to open, and then something else, a woman's voice, refusing to let him disappear quietly. Stay awake. He remembered that clearly, a command, not a plea. Sir, can you hear me? A paramedic asked. Leaning closer as the ambulance turned sharply through traffic, Adrian opened his eyes briefly. The ceiling lights blurred into soft white streaks. His throat burned as he tried to speak. The woman, he managed, the words weak but urgent. You're safe now, the paramedic reassured him gently. We'll take care of everything else. But Adrian did not want everything else. He wanted the answer to one question. Who stayed when everyone else stepped back? The ambulance arrived at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in less than 8 minutes. Doctors were already waiting, alerted by emergency dispatch that the patient was high profile, not because of his wealth, not officially, but because influence often traveled faster than paperwork. He was transferred quickly onto a hospital gurney and moved through bright corridors filled with controlled movement. Nurses spoke in short, efficient sentences. Medical equipment beeped steadily, establishing a rhythm of reassurance. Adrian's jacket was carefully removed. His injuries were assessed, CT scan ordered, blood drawn, burns treated. Through it all, one thought remained persistent beneath the fog of medication. Someone had chosen not to walk away. Hours passed before Adrian regained full consciousness. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beep of the heart monitor beside his bed. The lights were dimmed slightly, casting soft shadows across neutral-colored walls designed to comfort without distracting. A man stood near the window, posture straight, expression serious but relieved. Michael Carter, former Marine, personal advisor for nearly 15 years, the only person Adrian trusted without question. You scared half the city tonight, Michael said calmly when he noticed Adrian's eyes open. His voice carried the steady tone of someone accustomed to pressure. Adrian shifted slightly, discomfort tightening across his ribs. How bad? He asked. Michael gave a faint nod. Concussion, minor burns on your left arm, 2 stitches above the eyebrow, nothing permanent. Adrian exhaled slowly. What happened? Michael continued carefully. Police said it looked like a multi-vehicle collision. Your driver is stable. Broken wrist, but he'll recover. Adrian listened, absorbing the information with controlled calm. And the woman? He asked. Michael paused briefly. What woman? The one who pulled me out, Adrian said quietly. Michael's brow tightened slightly. Emergency services reported you were already outside the vehicle when they arrived. Witness statements are unclear. People saw someone break the window, but no one stayed to identify themselves. Adrian stared at the ceiling for several seconds. She kept telling me to stay awake, Adrian said slowly. Strong voice. Calm. Not afraid. Michael studied him carefully. We'll find her. Yes, Adrian replied without hesitation. We will. Michael pulled a small tablet from his jacket pocket, already making notes. Traffic cameras covered most of the highway segment. We'll review footage. Someone saw her clearly. Adrian nodded faintly, then closed his eyes briefly as fatigue pressed against him again. Moments later, the attending physician entered the room with professional confidence. You were very fortunate, she said after reviewing the chart. Another 3 minutes and smoke inhalation could have been fatal. Adrian almost smiled at the word. Doctor, Adrian said quietly, how long until discharge? The physician raised an eyebrow. You need observation overnight at minimum, possibly 48 hours. He nodded once. Waiting did not mean inactivity. Michael understood that without explanation. I'll begin the search immediately, Michael said. Already moving toward the door, Adrian stopped him with a single sentence. She didn't do it for attention. Michael turned slightly. Which means she won't come forward, Adrian continued. Which means she won't come forward, Adrian continued. Michael gave a faint, respectful nod. Then we look harder. After Michael left, the room settled into silence again. Outside the window, the Chicago skyline glowed against the dark sky. Thousands of lights from offices, apartments, restaurants, lives continuing without interruption. Somewhere in that city, the woman who saved him was likely returning to a life that looked nothing like this hospital room. Adrian turned his head slightly, feeling the stiffness along his neck. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar. Across the city, Nina sat quietly on the edge of her bed, hands still faintly trembling from adrenaline that had not fully left her system. She had washed the soot from her skin, but the memory remained vivid behind her eyes. She had not told anyone what happened. She opened her bag and removed her textbook, placing it carefully on the small wooden table beside her bed. Life would continue tomorrow. Across the quiet room, the digital clock shifted to 11:42 p.m. In another part of the city, Adrian Moretti remained awake longer than doctors recommended, staring at the ceiling as one question repeated itself clearly in his mind. Who walks into fire for a stranger? And why would someone like that choose to remain invisible? If this story touched something inside you, tell us where you are watching from and what this moment made you feel. Your voice matters, and your story might inspire someone else who still believes in quiet courage. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us continue bringing meaningful stories about truth, justice, and the unseen kindness that still exists in the world. By the following morning, the news had already begun to circulate in careful, controlled language across local media outlets. Headlines avoided certain words but emphasized others. Prominent Chicago businessman survives highway collision. Unidentified civilian credited with rescue. Authorities investigate cause of multi-vehicle crash. The reports were brief, cautious, and incomplete. But one detail remained consistent. The identity of the person who had pulled Adrian Moretti from the burning SUV remained unknown. Inside his hospital room, Adrian watched the muted television mounted across from his bed. The captions scrolled steadily along the bottom of the screen as footage replayed scenes from the accident site. The charred frame of the SUV was shown from a distance. Police tape fluttered lightly in the wind. Traffic had resumed as though nothing extraordinary had happened there just hours before. He reached for the remote and lowered the volume. The silence that followed felt heavier than the broadcast. Michael Carter entered without knocking, carrying a slim tablet and a folder containing printed still images pulled from traffic cameras along the highway corridor. His expression suggested progress, but not yet success. We've identified approximately 42 individuals who were present within visible range of the accident, Michael said, placing the folder carefully on the bedside table. Most remained in their vehicles. Several exited briefly. A few recorded video. Unfortunately, smoke obstructed the clearest angles. Adrian sat upright slowly, ignoring the stiffness along his ribs. Show me. Michael handed him a printed still image. grainy, slightly blurred. A figure approaching the vehicle through smoke. Female. Medium height. Dark coat. Canvas shoulder bag visible. Another image showed shattered glass reflecting flame. Another showed a silhouette pulling someone away from the vehicle. She moved quickly, Michael said, and left before police arrived. Adrian studied the images closely. Even through distortion, something in the posture was unmistakable. Purpose, not hesitation. She spoke to me, Adrian said quietly, told me to stay awake. Michael nodded. Witness statements confirm that. Multiple people reported hearing a woman shouting instructions. What else? One witness said she appeared to be coming from the bus stop on Wabash. Another described her clothing as similar to hotel staff uniform. Adrian's eyes sharpened slightly. Hotel? Michael nodded once. We're cross-referencing employee transit patterns in that area. Efficient. Methodical. Discreet. Michael understood the importance of subtlety. Keep this quiet, Adrian said. No press involvement. Of course. After Michael left, Adrian remained seated for several minutes, holding the printed image in his hand. He had built his entire life on calculated decisions, every risk weighed, every loyalty tested, every vulnerability concealed. Yet the woman in the image had acted without hesitation. No negotiation, no hesitation, no witness protection, no advantage, just action. Across the city, Nina's morning began earlier than usual. Sleep had been shallow, interrupted by flashes of orange light behind her eyelids. The sound of cracking glass replayed itself more than once before dawn. She rose before her alarm sounded and prepared for work in quiet routine. Coffee brewed slowly in the small kitchen. Toast warmed in an aging toaster that required gentle encouragement to function consistently. Outside the apartment window, the street was already alive with the ordinary rhythm of commuters preparing for another day. Her phone vibrated once on the table. A news notification. She hesitated before opening it. Local businessman injured in highway accident. She read only the first paragraph before locking the screen again. She did not need details. She remembered enough. Her hands remained steady as she packed her bag, though her thoughts lingered briefly on the moment his eyes had opened after she pulled him away from the vehicle. Confused, disoriented, alive. She had done what anyone should have done, or at least what she hoped anyone would have done. At work, nothing felt different. Rooms still needed cleaning, linen still needed folding. Guests still required polite distance and quiet efficiency. One of her coworkers mentioned the accident casually while organizing supply carts. Crazy thing on the news last night, the woman said. Some rich guy almost burned alive in his car. Nina kept her eyes on the stack of towels she was aligning carefully. I heard someone pulled him out, another employee added. Probably some off-duty firefighter, or someone looking for reward money, someone else suggested. Nina said nothing. She finished her assigned rooms and moved to the next floor without comment. Some acts did not require explanation. Back at the hospital, Michael returned with an update before noon. We located 3 hotels within walking distance of the accident site, he said. 2 employ night shift cleaning staff, who use public transit. Adrian listened carefully. 1 employee left work approximately 12 minutes before the accident occurred. Michael continued. Her transit card registered at the Wabash stop. Name? Nina Johnson, 29 years old. Adrian repeated the name silently. Nina Johnson. Michael handed him a short background summary. Community college student. Part-time enrollment status. Inactive. Employment records. Consistent. No criminal history. Address within South Loop District. Adrian studied the information quietly. A maid. Student. Invisible to most people who passed her each day. Yet, when everyone else stepped back, she stepped forward. Arrange a meeting, Adrian said calmly. Michael paused slightly. Directly? Yes. Michael nodded once. No publicity, no intermediaries, no unnecessary pressure. Respect required precision. Later that evening, Nina exited the hotel once again beneath a sky that had turned colder overnight. Wind moved quickly along the streets, carrying dry leaves into quiet corners of the sidewalk. She adjusted the strap of her bag and began the familiar walk toward the bus stop. Behind her, a dark sedan slowed gradually along the curb. Michael stepped out first. Posture relaxed. Expression neutral. Nina noticed immediately, but did not change her pace. "Miss Johnson?" Michael asked politely. She turned slowly, cautious but composed. "Yes? My name is Michael Carter," he said calmly. "I represent Mr. Adrian Moretti." The name meant little to her, but the tone told her enough. Michael continued carefully. "The man whose life you saved would like to thank you personally." Nina's expression remained steady. For a moment, the sounds of the city seemed to fade slightly. "I didn't do anything special," she replied quietly. Michael gave a faint, respectful nod. "On the contrary," he said, "you did something very rare." She hesitated briefly. "I don't want any trouble," she said honestly. "You won't receive any," Michael assured her. A pause. Then she asked the only question that mattered to her. "Is he alive?" Michael allowed himself a small smile. "Yes," he answered, "because you refused to walk away." Nina looked down briefly, considering the moment carefully. Sometimes the consequences of doing the right thing arrived later than expected. "All right," she said finally. "I can give him a few minutes." Michael nodded once and opened the passenger door. Across the city, Adrian Moretti waited calmly in the back seat of the sedan. The hospital band still visible around his wrist, a small reminder that even the most protected lives could change direction in a matter of seconds. And for the first time in many years, he was preparing to meet someone whose power did not come from wealth, influence, or fear, but from character. The interior of the sedan smelled faintly of leather and subtle cologne, the kind of restrained luxury that did not need to prove itself loudly. Nina sat carefully near the door, her canvas bag resting on her lap, posture straight but guarded. She had accepted the ride because refusing would have created more attention than she wanted, but acceptance did not mean comfort. Across from her, Adrian Moretti observed quietly. Up close, he appeared less intimidating than the rumors suggested. The cut above his eyebrow had been neatly stitched, the faint discoloration along his cheekbone evidence of the accident's violence. He wore a dark coat over a simple shirt, nothing extravagant, nothing that suggested the level of influence people associated with his name. But presence did not require decoration. It rested in the way he held eye contact, calm but precise, measuring without appearing to judge. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Traffic moved slowly outside, evening commuters inching forward through Chicago's persistent congestion. Streetlights reflected softly across the car windows, turning the outside world into shifting patterns of gold and gray. Adrian spoke first. "I remember your voice," he said evenly. "You told me not to fall asleep." Nina nodded slightly. "You were injured," she replied. "I didn't think you had much time." He studied her expression carefully. "Just honesty." "You risked your life," Adrian said. "I saw someone who needed help," she answered quietly. That was enough. The simplicity of her response unsettled him more than gratitude would have. Most people negotiated, calculated, positioned themselves for advantage. But she spoke as if the event required no explanation at all. Michael remained silent in the front seat, allowing the conversation to unfold naturally. Adrian leaned slightly forward, resting his hands loosely together. "I owe you my life," he said calmly. Nina shook her head once. "You don't owe me anything," she replied. He allowed a faint pause. "That is not how I see it." The sedan slowed to a stop beside a small cafe not far from Nina's apartment building. The location had been chosen deliberately. Neutral territory, public enough to feel safe, quiet enough for conversation. Michael stepped out first and opened the door. Inside, the cafe carried the warm scent of roasted coffee beans and baked bread. A soft instrumental jazz track played in the background, low enough not to interrupt conversation. Several patrons sat reading newspapers or typing on laptops, absorbed in their own evenings. Adrian gestured toward a small table near the window. "Please," he said respectfully. Nina sat across from him, her hands resting lightly around a ceramic cup of tea she had not yet tasted. He did not rush. Respect required patience. "Sat, I understand that you did not help me expecting anything." Adrian began carefully. But intention does not remove responsibility. She met his gaze calmly. I don't need recognition, she said. I am not offering recognition, he replied. I am offering gratitude. Michael placed a sealed envelope gently on the table between them. Nina glanced at it briefly but did not reach for it. $1 million, Adrian said plainly. No conditions, no obligations. Simply acknowledgement that what you did matters. The words rested quietly in the space between them. Outside, a bus passed slowly, brakes sighing as passengers stepped down into the evening air. Nina remained still. $1 million. The number held weight. It represented years of rent, tuition, security, relief from constant calculation, freedom from postponing decisions because of cost. Her fingers tightened slightly around the warm cup. She imagined her brother finishing school without debt. She imagined replacing her aging car. She imagined opening the college envelope without fear. For a moment, silence deepened. Then she pushed the envelope gently back toward him. I didn't save you for money, she said quietly. Adrian did not appear surprised. He studied her carefully, searching for hesitation. There was none. If kindness becomes a transaction, she continued, it stops being kindness. Michael shifted slightly, but Adrian remained still. What would you prefer instead? He asked. Nina hesitated briefly. There are children in this city who don't get second chances, she said. If you want to do something meaningful, help them. Her voice did not carry judgment, only clarity. Adrian leaned back slightly, considering her answer. In his world, money solved most problems. But here, money had been refused, without performance. Do you often refuse life-changing opportunities? He asked quietly. I try not to accept opportunities that change who I am, she answered. The honesty of that sentence settled into the conversation with quiet weight. Adrian gave a faint nod. Tell me something, he said after a moment. Why were you walking home from work carrying a college textbook? Nina seemed slightly surprised by the question. I started studying social work, she explained simply. I had to pause when tuition increased. Pause, Adrian repeated. For now. Do you plan to continue? Yes. The answer came immediately. Adrian noticed the textbook resting partially visible inside her canvas bag. Pages marked. Notes written carefully along margins. Evidence of discipline. Evidence of intention. You want to help people, he observed. Yes. Why? She thought briefly before answering. Because someone once helped me, she said. And I never forgot what that felt like. Adrian sat quietly for several seconds. In business, loyalty was purchased. In politics, loyalty was negotiated. But gratitude like this could not be manufactured. I cannot accept your refusal completely, Adrian said finally. Nina looked at him carefully. You already accepted it, she replied calmly. Not entirely. He reached for the envelope and placed it back inside his coat pocket. Money is not always the right currency, he said. Michael glanced briefly toward Adrian but did not interrupt. Adrian's tone remained steady. If financial reward is not appropriate, he continued, perhaps opportunity is. Nina watched him carefully now. Opportunity carried different meaning, different risk, different possibility. I believe you already earned something, Adrian said quietly. Long before you met me, the waitress passed by, refilling water glasses with polite efficiency. Life continued normally around them. No one noticed that two strangers were quietly negotiating the direction of a future neither had expected to share. I will not pressure you tonight, Adrian added calmly. But I will not ignore what you did. Nina considered that carefully. You don't have to do anything, she said softly. I disagree, he replied. Their eyes met briefly. Mutual understanding forming slowly. Respect without obligation. I appreciate the tea, she said after a moment, standing gently, but I should get home. Adrian stood as well. Of course. Michael opened the cafe door as evening air drifted inside. Before Nina stepped outside, Adrian spoke once more. Miss Johnson. She turned slightly. Yes? The strongest people I have ever met, he said quietly, are usually the ones nobody notices. She gave a small, polite nod. Then she left, returning to the familiar rhythm of sidewalks, buses, and responsibilities that had not changed simply because something extraordinary had happened. Adrian remained inside the cafe a moment longer, watching the reflection of city lights across the glass. Michael spoke carefully. She refused $1 million. Adrian allowed a faint expression of something unfamiliar. Yes, he replied calmly, which tells me she values something far more expensive. Outside, Nina walked steadily toward her apartment, unaware that the decision she had made would open a different kind of door. One that would not ask her to change who she was in order to walk through it. That night, Nina did not open her textbook immediately as she usually did. Instead, she sat quietly at the small kitchen table, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence of her apartment. The envelope of unpaid tuition remained inside her bag, untouched but never forgotten. The meeting replayed itself in her mind, not because of the money she had refused, but because of the unusual calm in Adrian Moretti's eyes when he accepted her answer without argument. People with power rarely accepted refusal easily. Yet he had. Her phone vibrated once against the table. A message from Malik appeared. "You okay? You sound tired earlier?" "Just long day," she typed back. "Everything's fine." She hesitated, then added, "Don't stay up too late." He responded with a thumbs-up emoji and a simple good night. Nina placed the phone down and leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly. The world had not changed simply because she had stepped briefly into someone else's crisis. Tomorrow she would wake early again, iron her uniform, and return to work. Life did not pause long enough to ask whether someone was ready for what came next. Across the city, Adrian sat inside his private office overlooking the river, the Chicago skyline reflecting faintly across the tall windows. The room was intentionally understated. Dark wood shelves, carefully arranged files, a single framed photograph from many years earlier when success had still been uncertain. Power, he had learned, did not need decoration. Michael stood across from him, reviewing a digital report. "Her employment record is consistent," Michael said. "No unexplained financial activity. No legal issues. She works double shifts occasionally to cover expenses. Community college transcript confirms high academic standing before tuition interruption." Adrian listened without interrupting. "And family?" he asked. "Younger brother. Warehouse logistics assistant. No immediate concerns. Financial pressure appears steady but manageable." Adrian nodded slightly. "She didn't hesitate," he said quietly. Michael closed the tablet. "Some people act without calculating consequences," he replied. Adrian's expression remained thoughtful. "Rare," he said. "Yes." Silence settled briefly between them. Michael had worked beside Adrian long enough to recognize the shift in his employer's tone. This was not curiosity. It was respect. "Prepare the scholarship structure," Adrian said calmly. Michael's brow lifted slightly. "Direct sponsorship? No publicity," Adrian clarified. "No institutional branding. Quiet arrangement." Michael nodded once. Understood. Across town, Nina prepared her clothes for the next morning. Her apartment was small but orderly, every item placed with intention. A narrow bookshelf held a mixture of used textbooks, paperbacks, and notebooks filled with careful handwriting. A small framed photograph of her mother sat beside a reading lamp. Her mother had always believed education was the most reliable form of dignity. "People can take many things from you," she had once said, "but knowledge gives you a voice nobody can silence." Nina touched the edge of the photograph. So Suhivan turning off the kitchen light. The next morning began like any other. The bus arrived late. Traffic moved slower than expected. The hotel lobby smelled faintly of citrus polish. Guests requested extra towels. Nothing dramatic. Nothing extraordinary. Routine offered comfort. During her lunch break, Nina sat in the staff room with a simple meal packed from home. Her coworker Angela spoke about rising grocery prices while another employee complained about unpredictable scheduling. Conversations remained ordinary, grounded in everyday concerns. Nina appreciated that normalcy. Then her phone vibrated again. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Miss Johnson? Michael's voice came through calmly. Yes? I apologize for contacting you during working hours, he said respectfully. Mr. Moretti would like to meet again briefly. At your convenience. Nina paused. I already explained my position. She replied. Yes, Michael said. And Mr. Moretti respects that. Silence lingered briefly. This conversation would not involve financial compensation, Michael added carefully. That detail caught her attention. When? She asked. Whenever you are comfortable. She considered the request carefully. After work, she said finally. Of course. The call ended politely. Nina returned to her duties with measured focus, though her thoughts shifted slightly. Some part of her sensed the conversation was not yet finished. That evening, the same cafe welcomed them again with soft lighting and the quiet rhythm of ordinary conversation. Adrian stood when she approached the table, acknowledging her presence with respectful formality. Thank you for meeting again, he said. I don't have much time. Nina replied honestly. I understand. Michael remained seated at a distance this time, allowing the conversation to remain private. Adrian spoke directly. You refused financial reward, he said calmly. I respect that. Nina nodded once. But refusing compensation does not eliminate the value of what you did. I didn't ask for anything, she replied. That is precisely why something is appropriate. She watched him carefully now. Measured tone. No pressure, no manipulation, only intention. I reviewed your academic record, Adrian continued. That surprised her. You looked into my background? Yes. She folded her hands loosely on the table. That feels unnecessary. I disagree, Adrian replied calmly. You interrupted your education due to financial barriers. That happens to many people. Yes, he said, which does not make it acceptable. She did not respond immediately. You want to complete your degree? Adrian continued. You want to work in social services. That's my plan. Plans require support. Nina's expression remained neutral. I don't want charity, she said clearly. This is not charity, Adrian replied. This is investment in someone who has already demonstrated character. She studied his face carefully. Why? She asked. Because the world benefits when people like you are not forced to abandon their potential, he answered calmly. Silence settled between them again. The waitress passed quietly, refilling water glasses without interruption. I am offering to fund the completion of your education, Adrian said simply. Tuition, books, necessary living support until graduation. Nina's first instinct was refusal. Independence had protected her this far. Reliance on powerful people carried risk. What would you expect in return? She asked cautiously. Nothing, he said. She watched his expression closely, searching for hidden conditions. There is always something, she replied carefully. Yes, Adrian said. The expectation is that you continue being exactly who you already are. That answer disarmed her more than persuasion would have. You don't know me, she said quietly. I know what you did when nobody was watching, he replied. Her eyes lowered briefly to the table. Many people had walked past the burning car. Only one had stepped forward. That does not obligate you to trust me, Adrian added calmly. Take time. Consider the offer. He placed a simple folder on the table. Inside, preliminary scholarship documentation prepared without institutional publicity. No press involvement. No contractual loyalty clauses. Only funding support. This opportunity belongs to you whether you accept or decline, Adrian said. She did not reach for the folder immediately. Some decisions required silence first. Outside the cafe window, evening traffic continued steadily. People hurried home. Lives unfolded in predictable patterns. Inside, Nina considered the possibility that the future she had postponed might not be as distant as she believed. For the first time in many months, the unopened college envelope waiting in her apartment felt less like a reminder of delay and more like an invitation waiting patiently for courage to return. Nina did not open the folder until much later that evening. She placed it on the small wooden table beside her bed and stared at it for several minutes, as though the simple act of unfolding the papers might quietly rearrange the balance of her life. Outside, the city moved through its usual rhythm of distant traffic, faint laughter from the apartment next door, and the occasional hum of a passing train in the distance. She removed her coat, washed her hands, and prepared a simple dinner of rice and vegetables, though she barely tasted any of it. Her thoughts kept returning to the calm certainty in Adrian Moretti's voice when he made the offer. There had been no urgency in his tone, no pressure disguised as generosity, just quiet confidence that the opportunity itself carried enough weight. Still, Nina understood the world well enough to know that help from powerful people often came with expectations that appeared later, sometimes subtly, sometimes all at once. She sat down finally and opened the folder. Inside were neatly organized documents outlining a full academic sponsorship, tuition coverage through degree completion, book allowance, transportation support, and a modest living stipend designed not to change her lifestyle, but to remove the pressure that had forced her to pause her education. There was no company branding, no public announcement, no requirement for publicity or loyalty. One page stood out for its simplicity. Educational grant agreement. No repayment required. No employment obligation required. Confidential arrangement. She read the lines twice, then a third time. Searching for hidden conditions. There were none. Her fingers rested lightly on the edge of the paper as a memory surfaced from years earlier. Her mother sitting at the same table, explaining the difference between pride and dignity. Pride refuses help because it fears judgment, her mother had said gently. Dignity accepts help when the purpose is right. Nina closed her eyes briefly. Purpose mattered. She reached for her phone and called Malik. "You're calling late," he said immediately, half amused. "That usually means something serious." "I was offered something," she said carefully. "What kind of something?" "Someone offered to pay for me to finish school." Silence followed. "Is this real?" he asked cautiously. "Yes. Are they expecting something back?" "No." "You sure?" "Yes." Malik exhaled slowly. "Then why do you sound worried?" "Because nothing in life comes without responsibility," she answered honestly. "That's not always a bad thing," he said. "You've been carrying responsibility alone long enough." She smiled faintly. "I just don't want to owe anyone something I can't repay." "You already repaid it," Malik said quietly. "You saved a man's life. Whatever happens now isn't charity, it's respect." The word lingered in her thoughts after the call ended. Across the city, Adrian sat alone in his office reviewing reports he had already memorized. Numbers moved across the page without meaning. Meetings were postponed. Calls delayed. For the first time in many years, business decisions felt secondary to something far more personal. Michael stood near the window, hands resting loosely behind his back. "She's reviewing the documents," Michael said. Adrian nodded slightly. "She will hesitate," he replied. "Yes, she should." Michael allowed a faint smile. People who consider decisions carefully rarely regret them. Adrian turned slightly, looking toward the skyline stretching beyond the glass. "She walked into fire for a stranger," he said quietly. "That tells you everything you need to know about her priorities." Michael understood the implication. "When people show you who they are in crisis," he replied, "believe them." The next day passed slowly for Nina. Her routine remained unchanged, but her awareness felt sharpened. Every detail carried subtle weight. The scent of cleaning solution, the crisp fold of hotel sheets, the quiet hum of vacuum cleaners in distant rooms. She found herself noticing small things she had overlooked before. Guests who tipped generously. Guests who avoided eye contact. Guests who spoke kindly to staff. The world revealed character in quiet ways. During her break, she opened the college envelope she had carried for months. Outstanding balance due, registration pending. A reminder of delay. But now, delay did not mean impossibility. It meant decision. That evening, she sent a brief message to Michael. "I would like to meet again." The reply came quickly. The meeting took place, not in the cafe this time, but in a modest office space Adrian occasionally used for private discussions. The room was simple, furnished with comfortable chairs and a desk containing only necessary documents. Only quiet professionalism. Adrian stood when she entered. "Thank you for coming," he said. She held the folder carefully in both hands. "I read everything," she said. "And?" She took a slow breath. "I want to be clear," she began. "If I accept this, nothing about me changes. I still make my own decisions." "That is the intention," Adrian replied calmly. "I will not represent you publicly. You will not be asked to. I will not accept favors outside education. Understood?" She studied his expression once more. "And if one day I disagree with you," she added carefully, "this support will not be used to influence my judgment." Adrian gave a faint nod. "Independence is not something I intend to purchase," he said. Silence settled briefly. Then Nina extended the signed agreement. "I accept," she said quietly. The moment carried no celebration, no dramatic reaction, just quiet acknowledgement that something meaningful had shifted. Adrian accepted the document respectfully. "You earned this long before we met," he said. She shook her head slightly. "I earned the chance," she replied. "The rest still requires work." He allowed the smallest trace of a smile. "That is precisely why you deserve it." Outside, the evening air had turned colder again, carrying the distant sound of wind moving between buildings. Life continued as it always did, unaware that within a quiet office, two very different lives had intersected in a way neither could have predicted. For Nina, the future no longer felt paused. For Adrian, the debt he carried no longer felt abstract. Sometimes justice did not arrive through courts or contracts. Sometimes it arrived quietly, disguised as opportunity. And sometimes the most powerful change began not with wealth, but with the simple decision to believe that character deserved investment. The first morning after Nina accepted the scholarship did not feel dramatic. There were no sudden celebrations, no immediate transformation, no cinematic shift in the pace of her life. Her alarm rang at the same early hour, and she rose with the same quiet discipline that had carried her through years of responsibility. The difference was not visible in her surroundings, but it rested somewhere deeper, like a steady warmth beneath the surface of an otherwise ordinary day. She prepared coffee in the same chipped ceramic mug she had used for years. The kitchen light flickered briefly before settling into a soft yellow glow. Outside, the Chicago morning carried a familiar mixture of wind, distant traffic, and the muffled rhythm of neighbors leaving for work. Nothing about the world announced that opportunity had arrived. Opportunity rarely announced itself loudly. It simply waited to be recognized. Nina reviewed her class registration confirmation once more before placing her phone into her bag. 3 courses for the upcoming term: Introduction to Social Policy, Community Advocacy Methods, Ethics in Public Service. Subjects she had once studied with enthusiasm before financial pressure forced her to step away. Now the path had reopened, but she understood clearly that the opportunity itself did not guarantee success. Discipline still belonged to her. At the bus stop, she noticed details she had overlooked before. A middle-aged man carefully helped his elderly father onto the bus, steadying him with patient hands. A woman in her late 50s greeted the driver by name, exchanging familiar conversation about weather and rising grocery prices. These were small examples of quiet responsibility, the kind of everyday commitment that rarely appeared extraordinary, but held communities together over decades. During the ride downtown, Nina opened her notebook and began outlining a weekly study schedule. Even with financial support, time remained a limited resource. She would continue working part-time at the hotel while attending classes in the afternoon and evening. Balance would not be easy, but difficulty had never discouraged her before. Across the city, Adrian Moretti began his morning earlier than usual. His office overlooked the river, the water reflecting early sunlight between buildings that seemed determined to reach higher each year. He reviewed documents related to several business operations, but his attention drifted occasionally toward the single folder marked Educational Grant Confirmation. Michael entered quietly, carrying updated reports. "She enrolled this morning," Michael said simply. Adrian nodded once. "Good." Michael placed the report on the desk. Financial transfer completed through the private foundation structure. No public visibility. Adrian appreciated efficiency, but more importantly, he appreciated discretion. Nina had made it clear she did not want attention, and respect required honoring that boundary. "She continues working," Michael added. "That does not surprise me," Adrian replied. Most individuals in her position would reduce workload immediately. Most individuals did not refuse $1 million, Adrian said calmly. Michael allowed himself a brief smile. Respect, he understood, was now firmly established. Later that afternoon, Nina attended her first class in nearly a year. The lecture hall smelled faintly of paper and dry erase markers, a strangely comforting familiarity. Students spoke quietly while arranging laptops, notebooks, and textbooks across narrow desks. Some looked nervous, others confident, others distracted. The professor, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and attentive eyes, introduced the course with measured clarity. Social policy, she began, is not simply about laws. It is about understanding how systems influence human dignity. Nina listened carefully, writing notes in steady handwriting. She did not rush. She did not attempt to impress. She simply focused on absorbing each idea fully. During a break, another student introduced himself politely. "First semester?" he asked. "Continuing," she replied. "Balancing work too?" "Yes." He nodded knowingly. "Same here. Not easy, but worth it." She appreciated the honesty. Older students often approached education differently. Less performance, more purpose. After class, Nina walked toward the bus stop beneath a sky already dimming toward evening. Her mind remained active with ideas discussed during lecture. Systemic barriers, access inequality, community resilience. Words that described realities she had witnessed firsthand. Her phone vibrated once, a message from Adrian. "I hope your first day went well." She paused briefly before replying. "It did. Thank you for keeping your word." The response arrived moments later. "Your future belongs to you." I simply removed an obstacle. She considered the phrasing carefully. Removed an obstacle, not created a dependency. That distinction mattered. That evening, Nina visited Malik briefly, bringing groceries she could now afford without calculation. They ate simple food and spoke about ordinary things. His work schedule, rising rent prices, memories of their mother's insistence on finishing what you start. "You always said you wanted to help people who didn't have anyone standing up for them," Malik said quietly. "I still do." "Then this makes sense," he replied. "Some people climb ladders, some people build them." She smiled faintly. "Let's hope I can do both." Across town, Adrian attended a small private meeting regarding one of his transportation operations. Discussions moved efficiently. Numbers presented clearly. Decisions made without delay. Yet his thoughts occasionally returned to the conversation in the cafe days earlier. If kindness becomes a transaction, it stops being kindness. Few people spoke to him that way. Fewer still spoke without fear. Michael noticed the shift in his employer's focus but did not comment. He understood that certain encounters altered perspective more effectively than strategy. Later that evening, Adrian stood alone near the office window overlooking the city lights. Chicago at night resembled a field of quiet signals, each light representing decisions, responsibilities, histories, and futures intersecting in ways impossible to fully predict. Power often influenced outcomes, but character influenced direction. The distinction mattered more than most people realized. For Nina, the following weeks demanded discipline she welcomed. Her schedule required careful coordination between work shifts, study hours, reading assignments, and necessary rest. She reduced unnecessary expenses, maintained careful budgeting, and refused to allow financial support to alter her sense of responsibility. One evening, while reviewing a case study assignment involving housing inequality, she paused to consider how close she herself had come to losing educational access permanently. Circumstances beyond individual control often determined opportunity long before talent could intervene. Her professor's voice echoed in her memory. Justice is not only about correcting wrong actions. It is about preventing preventable loss of potential. That sentence stayed with her. Preventable loss. Her education had nearly become one. Now, it would not. Weeks passed quietly, progress measured not in dramatic events but in completed assignments, improved comprehension, and growing confidence that her original path remained valid. One evening, as she walked home carrying a new textbook purchased with scholarship funds, she paused on Shion, briefly near the intersection where everything had changed. Traffic moved normally now. No sign of fire remained. No visible reminder of crisis. Only memory. People passed her without recognition. Just as before. She preferred it that way. Heroism, she believed, did not require audience. It required decision, and sometimes, the most meaningful decisions did not end when danger disappeared. Sometimes, they began there. The middle of the semester arrived quietly, without announcement, marked only by the increasing weight of assignments and the steady rhythm of deadlines that demanded discipline rather than inspiration. Nina adjusted her routine with careful precision, learning how to divide each day into manageable segments of effort. Morning hours remained dedicated to work at the hotel, where routines offered familiarity and stability. Afternoons belonged to lectures, research materials, and discussions that challenged not only her knowledge, but her understanding of how systems shaped the lives of people who rarely had influence within them. Her professors quickly noticed her consistency. She was not the loudest student in the classroom, nor the most visibly confident. But she listened carefully, spoke with intention, and asked questions that revealed lived understanding rather than theoretical curiosity. Experience had sharpened her perspective in ways textbooks could not replicate. One afternoon, during a seminar discussion on community responsibility, the professor asked the class to consider why some individuals intervened during emergencies while others hesitated. Risk perception, one student offered. Fear of legal consequences, another suggested. Self-preservation, someone added. Nina spoke only when the room fell briefly quiet. Sometimes people are waiting for someone else to decide first, she said calmly. But sometimes the right decision doesn't wait for agreement. The professor nodded slowly. That is often true, she replied. Courage frequently appears inconvenient. The discussion moved forward, but Nina remained thoughtful. She had not intended to share anything personal, yet the memory of heat against her skin, the sound of cracking glass, and the week across the city, Adrian continued managing his operations with renewed focus. But subtle changes appeared in the decisions he made. He requested additional internal audits across several divisions, increasing transparency within structures that had once relied heavily on discretion. Michael noticed the adjustments immediately. New compliance protocols? Michael asked one morning as they reviewed updated reports. Improved accountability, Adrian corrected calmly. Influence from recent events, Michael added carefully. Adrian did not deny it. When survival depends on someone else's integrity, he said quietly, you begin to evaluate how integrity operates within your own structures. Michael understood the implication clearly. Power protected many things, but it did not protect character. Meanwhile, Nina balanced her responsibilities with increasing confidence. Her coursework demanded detailed analysis of policy frameworks affecting housing stability, healthcare access, and educational inequality. Many case studies reflected patterns she had observed long before she understood the terminology describing them. Late one evening, she worked on a research paper examining the long-term impact of interrupted education among low-income adults. Statistics confirmed what she already knew personally. Many individuals forced to pause their studies never returned, not because of lack of ability, but because life continued to introduce new obstacles faster than opportunities could recover. Opportunity required timing. Support required precision. Justice required awareness. She paused briefly, reflecting on how close she had come to becoming one of those statistics. Her phone vibrated softly beside her notebook. A message from Adrian. Michael mentioned, "Your academic progress is strong." She hesitated briefly before responding. "I'm only doing what I planned to do before things became difficult." His reply arrived quickly. Difficulty often reveals priorities more clearly than comfort. She considered the phrasing carefully. You are investing resources without expecting influence. That is unusual. A brief pause followed before the next message appeared. Respect cannot function properly when control replaces trust. She set the phone aside. Thoughtful. Trust. And a less, and a nine. The word carried weight in both their worlds, though expressed differently. A week later, Nina attended a community outreach event organized through one of her courses. The program connected students with local organizations providing mentorship support for teenagers navigating unstable home environments. The work required patience more than authority, listening more than advising. During one conversation, a 17-year-old student admitted he had nearly dropped out of school after working late hours to support his younger siblings. "Feels like nobody notices," he said quietly. Nina recognized the tone immediately. "I noticed," she replied. He looked skeptical. "You don't even know me." "I know what it feels like to carry responsibility early," she said calmly. He hesitated before speaking again. "How do you keep going?" She thought briefly. "You don't solve everything at once," she said. "You solve the next right thing." He nodded slowly. Sometimes advice did not require complexity. Sometimes clarity was enough. Later that evening, Nina reflected on how easily her own future might have narrowed if someone had not removed one obstacle at the right moment. Opportunity did not eliminate effort. It allowed effort to function properly. Across the city, Adrian reviewed quarterly projections with a focus that surprised several senior managers. His questions emphasized sustainability rather than expansion, stability rather than speed. Some executives interpreted the shift as caution. Michael recognized it as recalibration. "Reputation is a fragile currency," Adrian remarked during one meeting. "It must be maintained with consistency." Several nodded in agreement, though few fully understood the personal context behind the statement. Late that evening, Adrian walked briefly along the riverwalk, hands resting in the pockets of his coat as cold air sharpened the quiet of the city. The accident had reminded him of something he had nearly forgotten during years spent building protective structures around himself. Control was temporary, influence was conditional, character remained. Some debts could not be measured in financial terms. Across town, Nina completed her research paper and submitted it electronically just minutes before the midnight deadline. She closed her laptop slowly, allowing herself a rare moment of satisfaction without celebration. Progress did not always feel dramatic. Often it felt quiet, earned gradually through repeated effort. She prepared tea and opened her window slightly, allowing cool air to move through the room. Somewhere in the distance, sirens sounded briefly before fading again into the background rhythm of the city. Her gaze rested briefly on the stack of textbooks arranged neatly beside her desk. Evidence of continuation, evidence of restored direction. Her mother had once told her that dignity often required patience longer than most people expected. Patience had not been wasted. Opportunity had not been permanent. But neither had hardship. For both Nina and Adrian, the consequences of a single moment on a burning roadway continued unfolding quietly, shaping decisions neither had planned but both now understood, carried meaning beyond coincidence. Sometimes the most important changes did not announce themselves as transformation. They simply altered what became possible next. Spring arrived gradually in Chicago, not with sudden warmth but with small, steady changes that reminded the city how to breathe again. Snow gave way to rain, and rain gave way to mornings that no longer felt heavy with cold. People walked with less urgency, pausing slightly longer at crosswalks, allowing sunlight to settle briefly on their shoulders. The season did not erase hardship, but it softened its edges. For Nina Johnson, the passing months had been measured not by weather, but by progress that felt both quiet and deeply meaningful. Her coursework had grown more demanding, yet she had met each requirement with the same steady persistence that once carried her through double shifts and unpaid tuition notices. Now, her days followed a rhythm that balanced responsibility with possibility. Her grades reflected discipline, but more importantly, they reflected clarity of purpose. Professors frequently commented on the practical perspective she brought into classroom discussions. She did not approach theory as an abstract exercise. She approached it as preparation for real lives waiting outside institutional walls. One afternoon, her ethics in public service professor asked the class to consider the meaning of justice beyond legal definitions. "What is justice when no court is involved?" the professor asked. Several students offered academic interpretations. Nina waited before answering. "Justice can also be the removal of obstacles," she said calmly. "Sometimes fairness isn't about punishment. It's about making sure someone has the chance they were almost denied." The room grew quiet briefly. The professor nodded with thoughtful approval. "Opportunity," she said, "is often the most overlooked form of justice." Nina wrote the sentence carefully in her notebook. Across the city, Adrian Moretti had quietly finalized the structure of a small private foundation designed to support adult students who had been forced to interrupt their education due to financial hardship. The foundation operated without public branding, offering discreet scholarships through existing educational institutions. No press releases announced its existence. No gala events promoted its generosity. Michael reviewed the documents with professional precision. Second Chance Foundation, he read aloud. Adrian nodded once. The name is appropriate, Michael said. It reflects purpose, Adrian replied simply. He had no interest in public recognition. Reputation built through quiet action tended to last longer than reputation built through spectacle. Late one afternoon, nearly a year after the accident, Nina received confirmation that her final semester requirements had been successfully completed. The email arrived without ceremony, simple and official. Degree requirements satisfied. Bachelor of Social Work conferred. She read the sentence twice before closing her eyes briefly. Completion did not erase difficulty, but it honored endurance. That calm, otter, of 9, or calm, r, endure it, 2 at 7. Malik insisted on celebrating with a modest family dinner, the small apartment filled with laughter, simple food, and stories repeated comfortably, the way families often revisit moments that remind them how far they have traveled together. You didn't just finish school, Malik said quietly after the others stepped into the kitchen. You proved something. What did I prove? She asked. That stopping isn't the same as quitting, he answered. She smiled faintly. Across town, Adrian prepared for a small private ceremony hosted by the community college where Nina had first begun her studies. The event was not widely publicized. A handful of faculty members attended alongside several students who had received support through the foundation's early funding. Nina had not known Adrian would attend until she saw him standing near the back of the room, speaking quietly with one of the department administrators. She approached with calm confidence. You didn't tell me you would be here, she said politely. I didn't want the day to feel complicated, he replied. It doesn't, she assured him. Michael stood nearby, maintaining respectful distance as always. During the brief ceremony, each graduate was invited to share a short statement about their future goals. Some spoke about career plans. Others spoke about family sacrifices that had made the moment possible. When Nina's turn came, she stepped forward without hesitation. I began this program believing education would change my life, she said clearly. But I've learned that education doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you've been becoming all along. Her voice remained steady. I hope to work with families and young people who feel invisible. Because sometimes the biggest difference in someone's life is knowing that their effort still matters, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. She paused briefly before continuing. Opportunity should not depend entirely on luck. But when opportunity does appear, we have a responsibility to use it well. The room responded with quiet applause. No grand speeches followed, no dramatic gestures, just acknowledgement. After the ceremony, Adrian spoke with Nina privately near the entrance. You kept your independence, he said. I kept my direction, she corrected gently. He gave a faint nod. That was always the intention. She hesitated briefly before speaking again. The foundation will help many people, she said. That is the goal. You didn't have to do that. Neither did you, he replied. The shared understanding required no elaboration. Outside, the afternoon sunlight reflected softly across the sidewalks as graduates took photographs with family members. Some held flowers. Others carried framed certificates carefully protected from the breeze. Life continued normally. No headlines described the moment. No public recognition altered the atmosphere. And that felt appropriate. Before leaving, Adrian offered one final observation. The strongest people I have met rarely ask to be noticed, he said quietly. Nina smiled slightly. Most of them are too busy working, she replied. As she walked toward the train station, diploma secured carefully inside her bag beside the textbooks that had accompanied her through months of effort, she felt consistent. The same person who had once stepped toward danger when others hesitated. The same person who believed dignity was not defined by circumstance. The same person who understood that justice did not always arrive through institutions. Sometimes justice appeared quietly, disguised as a second chance offered without condition. Behind her, Adrian remained standing near the college entrance for a few moments longer. observing the ordinary joy of individuals whose persistence had outlasted difficulty. Wealth had taught him how easily resources could solve problems. Experience had taught him something more valuable. Character solved the right ones. As the city continued its steady movement around them, both understood that their lives would move forward separately, connected not by obligation, but by a shared belief that one moment of courage could begin a chain of consequences reaching far beyond the original act. Some heroes never expect recognition. Some acts of integrity never appear in public record. But the quiet impact of one decision can echo longer than applause ever could. And sometimes, the greatest form of justice is simply making sure that someone who refused to walk away is finally given the chance to move forward. This story reminds us that true character reveals itself in moments when no one is watching and no reward is guaranteed. Courage is not always loud, and justice does not always come through courts or power. Sometimes, real justice happens quietly, when one person chooses compassion over fear and refuses to ignore another human being in need. Nina did not act because of wealth, recognition, or influence. She acted because her values did not allow her to walk away. In return, Adrian learned that power alone cannot command respect, but integrity can inspire it. The lesson for all of us is simple yet profound. Kindness is never wasted, courage can change more than one life, and sometimes the greatest impact we leave on the world begins with a single decision to do what is right, even when it is difficult. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.